Freight movement is the backbone of Tennessee's economy. Billions and billions of dollars of goods move through our state on our highways, rails, airports, and waterways every day. When freight moves efficiently, Tennessee businesses thrive, supply chains stay resilient, and communities benefit from the jobs and the economic growth. As Dan mentioned, I've set a clear vision for what I want to accomplish at TDOT. We want to relentlessly pursue excellence in three key areas: program delivery, staff development, and modernization of our system, such that we can be prepared to deliver infrastructure that'll stand the test of time. That vision guides everything that we do, every decision that we make. It challenges all of us at TDOT to lead boldly and deliver consistently and modernize our system as we prepare Tennessee for the future. Many of you know we are in the midst of the most ambitious program in Tennessee's history. This means investing in what would be truly a multimodal system, one that goes beyond just traditional transportation, but also embraces air, rail, and transit as integral parts of the state network. It means positioning Tennessee as a leader in transportation across the country. And it means fulfilling our commitments to Tennesseans in the vein of what gets started gets finished. The work that all of you do directly supports that vision. Looking further ahead to the rest of this year and beyond, we've got a great deal in store for Tennessee.
Go back again. He just also I'm going to leave this moment on her and shut down.
Can you talk real quick? Can you talk real quick?
Can you hear me?
Mm,
Super excited to talk about our topic today. It was a great segue. Just a minute ago, they were talking about getting into work this morning and seeing the trucks out on the road, right? So that's what we're going to talk about this morning. Amy and I are going to cover, let me move this out of the way. Okay, we're going to talk about rural service patrol this morning. Some DriveWise alerts. Some of you may be familiar with DriveWise. I'll cover what we're doing in our state with that. And then Amy's going to come up and talk about our oversized overweight program as well as Weigh in Motion. Okay. So our help program, I hope you all are familiar with our help trucks. They're the big yellow trucks on the interstate. And their goal is to clear the lanes, keep traffic moving. So our program has been around since 1999. Hard to believe, 27 years it's been operational. And we've built a strong program. We've got a strong foundation. We're pretty well recognized across the country as a great safety service patrol program. As a result, we wanted to extend this program to the rural areas. So early 2025, we found out that we did receive funding to extend the program to the rural areas. And so we began writing an RFP for this. We wanted to mimic this contracted program to be fairly identical to what we have in place. One thing I'd like to point out in that lower right corner, you'll see a number in green. You can't see it, it says 24 minutes versus 66 minutes. So that's average roadway clearance time when we have a help truck on the scene. We're hoping to bring a similar value like that to the rural areas. And so it's one of the things that's just going to keep traffic moving, keep those commercial vehicles down the road, and just keep everybody else, safe and secure. It does a couple of things, right? So you've got law enforcement, our highway patrol, and in the rural areas, they have fewer officers available. So those that are dedicated to working with commercial vehicles would maybe otherwise have to stop with a minor incident or maybe some debris in the roadway. We're going to free up their ability now to do what they were meant to do and keep traffic moving, do the law enforcement part of it while we handle those minor details and keeping the lanes open and keeping them moving. Since 1999, we've been running this. And so last year when we got the funds for it, we set out to do our RFP. By the end of the year, November, we had a contractor selected. And by December, we had a contract signed. Let's see, slides can't move here. Okay, so Autobase is the name of the company that we went with. They're owned by VMS, Vehicle Management Solutions. They've got a footprint in 23 states. What we hired them to do, this is all they do. They do safety service patrol, so they're very familiar with our operations. They're not somebody that's new to this business, so there's not a big learning curve for them, right? So they're going to mimic our program. They're going to take our training, and they're going to teach their staff to run their program like we do. Again, we're not asking a lot of them because this is something they've been doing for 25 years, exclusively doing safety service patrol. The type of services that they're going to do are identical to ours. We're going to do safe, quick clearance whenever it's possible to do so. We have MOUs in place with the Highway Patrol so that we can get the lanes open whenever it's safe to do so. Now, whenever there's a criminal element or there's injuries, we're not going to interfere and we're not going to move the lanes until it's safe to do so. But we have asked this program to be as aggressive as our own program to clear the lanes when possible. And that includes push, pull, drag whenever you can, right? So they have some pretty good sized trucks with big push bumpers and then get things out of the road as needed. But, you know, in addition, they're gonna work those crashes. They're gonna do the traffic control, set up work zones, temporary work zones, but they're also gonna work with our maintenance departments as well. So there's gonna be those incidents that are gonna be all hands on deck. There are gonna still be some large incidents. They're gonna be a part of that as well, whether it's doing a diversion route or whether it's doing queue protection. They're an additional player on the scene now that's going to be able to, it's like an additional tool in the toolbox, right? So we're going to be able to help this responder community out in this additional way by having these folks already on the scene. And, you know, secondary services are going to be tire changes, overheats, fueling, jump starts, making sure people are going to keep moving because we don't want somebody sitting on the shoulder either. We want to make sure the shoulders are clear and folks continue to move because, you know, there's a lot of distracted drivers and things on the shoulder can quickly become an incident. So if we can do that and keep folks moving and safe, then our highways are going to be safer for everybody. Here's a picture of what their trucks look like. They look very identical to our own help trucks. They are a slightly smaller truck, but they have all the equipment that we carry. And you'll notice on the front, that really large push bumper, they're capable of pushing an 80,000 pound tractor trailer. So anything larger than that is an oversized vehicle that probably going to be a little bit out of their depth. They could combine a couple of vehicles to move that, but in any case, they've already been doing this. So they've moved a couple of tractor trailers out in Memphis with these trucks right here. They're F-250s, but they're going to be a 2500 series truck. So very capable vehicle. Their uniforms are identical to our own help program. They use the same vendor that we do. So for all intents and purposes, you will not know if you're on the side of the road, whether you have a DOT person or a contracted individual that's helping you out. We want the program to look exactly identical to ours. Now go back to the truck. You notice we have our TDOT logo on the side. We have our incident management sticker on the side as well. So on the front of it, it says TDOT help. So anyone that's on the side of the road understands that they're receiving this support and service from the DOT. We split up our state into 4 regions, and that's how we're rolling out this program. We have our Region 4 in the Memphis area, Region 3 here, Nashville, Region 2 is the Chattanooga area, and Region 1 is Knoxville. So I have here Region 1. Before I go into that, let me just say that this is a pretty large program that we're rolling out. There's going to be over 78 vehicles involved, over 113 personnel. So it's a pretty large operation to get going at once. Once we got the RFP signed and we got the date, we realized we had to do this in phases. So we're rolling this out through 4 phases. We're starting each region separately. Region 1 will be starting this Sunday. This is the 3rd phase of the rollout. Me and my staff will be out there Sunday. We'll be there for the week, make sure this rollout goes off successfully. We do think it will. The first 2 rollouts did a few little hiccups to start, nothing major, but we've got all those ironed out. We feel like this is going to be a really successful one here in Region 1. But this is our largest region. They've got 12 routes, and they're going to have over 48 staff in this region. You can see those highlighted routes will be the areas that they'll be patrolling and covering. Region 2 was the first region that rolled out phase 1. They rolled out on March 29th, and they cover sections on 75, 24, and 40. Region 3 will be the last phase of the rollout. That will be here at the end of June, and this is the 2nd largest deployment. Our help program is primarily here in the Nashville urban area, and then everything outside of that, you can see how the routes extend to the borders of this Middle Tennessee region. And then Region 4 was the 2nd deployment. They rolled out April 26th, and their primary route is 40 between the river in towards Shelby County, and then a section of I-269. Our organizational chart here. We're managing this contract out of headquarters. That's going to be my office in Traffic Operations Division. I will be working very closely with the region staff, our traffic operations managers, as well as our health program, as well as the district managers and superintendents. We've worked with them as we've gone deploying this program. We've had several stakeholder meetings so that everyone's on the same page and understands what's expected. But then our auto-based team is directly below. Those are the counterparts that each of us will be working with to make sure that we're all on the same page and that they're doing exactly what we're paying them for and that the program's working the way we want it to. Communications flow, we want all this information to run through our TMCs, 4 TMCs in our state, and they're the hub of information. So this is a performance-based contract. We want to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do, and we're going to track all that by taking in the incident data into our TMCs, and then that information flows in and out of our TMCs. We communicate with Highway Patrol, local law enforcement, fire, rescue, EMS, as well as our maintenance staff and our rural health program. They'll be dispatched out of our TMCs as well. So that is our Rural Service Patrol program in a nutshell. Third deployment coming up this weekend. We're super excited and we can't wait till this program is fully deployed at the end of June. But we think it's going to do a lot of great things in the rural areas to keep traffic moving and keep that congestion flow down. Secondly, what I wanted to cover briefly is going to be DriveWise. Has anybody heard of DriveWise alerts? That you are familiar with it, right? This is our way. So I have programmatic oversight of our TMCs and our Safety Service Patrol program across the state. So what we do in our TMCs is we communicate with the public. We send information in and out of our TMCs. This is a direct communication to commercial vehicles that subscribe to the DriveWise service. So we've signed up for 3 modules of DriveWise. Traffic slowdown alerts. We have a virtual sign network and emergency alerts. Traffic slowdown alerts sends out 2 different types of alerts, congestion alerts and sudden slowdown alerts. So the little picture there to the right is an ELD. That's an electronic logging device that you'll find in some commercial vehicles. In some cases, it's a built-in device that's right in the cab of their vehicle. In other cases, it's a phone that's mounted. But in any case, they're going to get a message similar to what you see there. And so this pulls INRIX data, and it will send information on congestion slowdowns or a sudden slow. So we're getting the info out to these vehicles that subscribe to this service as early as possible so that they can be on the lookout. We want to avoid these secondary crashes, especially involving large vehicles like commercial vehicles. That can be really bad. Secondary crashes are typically worse than the primary crash. And so the earlier we get this information out, the sooner we can slow this traffic down. In addition, we have a reporting dashboard where we can look at the number of alerts that go out to these vehicles. I looked at it briefly yesterday evening, and over the last year, we've sent out over 500,000 alerts to over 90,000 vehicles. Now, some vehicles get the same alert as they get multiple alerts as they travel across our state, depending on what route they take and what congestion they encounter. But it is, I think it's a successful tool and it gets that information out there. Now, not every commercial vehicle subscribes to DriveWise, but there's a large amount that do. There's other programs that do similar things and we work with them as well. So our virtual sign network, we have over 200 signs. If you're familiar with the DMS signs that are over the interstate that send a message to public letting them know where something's blocked and how long it's going to delay, you can think of this as a virtual sign. So we give it a lat and long and it puts that message wherever we decide to put it on our access roads. But you'll get the slow down and move over alerts whenever you pass that lat long location. So the commercial vehicle will receive that message. And those are custom alerts that have 2 lines of information up to 25 characters. So our TMC staff are putting a custom message directly to the commercial vehicles that subscribe. Again, that's over 200 locations, and a lat long will set the location and you can determine the bearing, whichever direction you are wanting to send that message to. And very soon we'll have the ability to put that out in Spanish and French as well. And then finally, emergency messaging. This is a 24/7 service that's available to our TMC staff. those things that you can't plan for, or big incidents that happen all of a sudden, it's going to be over 3 hours of delay. We can get this message out to multiple locations, even outside of our 200 signs that we have for our sign, our virtual sign network. So this was very helpful. This is an example of what we did for Hurricane Helene. Traffic was going everywhere at the time. Lots of roads were closed and there was very few ways to get that information out there. So this was one way that was helpful to get out to some commercial vehicles. Of course, we used every other option that we could at the time, but they were very helpful in letting folks know when the roads were closed. So again, anything that's an emergency or unplanned that's going to go for 3 hours or more, we have the ability to send those messages out. But those are a couple of things that I'm working on just at a very high level. I wanted to bring it to your attention just to let you know that we influence the commercial vehicle traffic as often as we can, however we can as well, as part of our motorist information. Those are the bits that I have, and I'm going to let Amy come up and cover the second part.
Well, hello. So I'm the TISMO manager in traffic operations, and just to kind of give you a brief overview, ITS deployment, which is just the maintaining and construction of some of our ITS infrastructure, or all of our ITS infrastructure, as well as formerly our oversized overweight division fell underneath me. So if Josh were here, he would give you a more holistic perception, but you're getting a piecemeal perception with Adam and I. One of the projects I wanted to highlight that we have in our queue is, oh, hold on, another one. Hold on. Okay. Oh, okay. Got it. One of the innovations that we have currently coming down the pipeline in ITS deployment is our the completion of our weigh in motion sensors statewide. So I think this is a project that was kind of developed out of Dan's office and then kind of went to Preston's office for a little bit and is now in the queue for our office to actually, I get it in the ground is how I kind of describe what we do. So just a brief overview of this statewide. This is 28 sensors over the sites that you see highlighted as either red, yellow, and green just across the state. Of these 28, 8 are actually going to be used for not only gathering data, but utilized as an enforcement screening, technology for our troopers at weigh stations. This project, anytime you do something new, there's going to be the good, the bad, the ugly, and I'll get into that a little bit in some of the next slides. The green locations that you see there, those are good to go and are currently in what we consider a burn-in phase, which is just making sure that it's working correctly. And the feedback I'm getting thus far is that they're performing exactly as expected. So excellent news. The yellow sites that you're seeing here are ones that we're still experiencing some connectivity issues with, that are either just coordination with local utility companies or us getting cellular modems in place for them. So don't worry about it. I've been told like this week basically that those are going to be moved to green. The red sites, however, those are sites that have been pinged as will be impacted by the next paving cycle with TDOT. But don't worry about it, because I'm going to get into that in the next slide with the lessons learned. Okay, so one of the lessons learned here is that material selection matters. I think that during the planning of this and just by chatting with our friends in peer states, we're one of the only states that installed these in OGFC. Yeah. So that has been a lesson learned in and of itself, as the sensors themselves are not doing as well as anticipated in that particular material. So we're planning for those life cycle replacements through the implementation of a maintenance contract. That was something that previously wasn't in place, but my team's coordinating with planning and our headquarters construction contracts team to get that out the gate to be released in tandem with the completion of the construction project. So not only will these devices be installed and be working, but they will be maintained properly and we'll be able to plan for life cycle replacement. So when I was telling you about those sites in red that we are foreseeing will be needing replacement due to resurfacing, we'll have a mechanism in place to be able to do so. and I kind of touch on that, and that we needed to coordinate closely with paving operations. So one of the things that we identified as a challenge is between the inception of this project and getting it out the door, there were just some delays that kind of compounded and got us off schedule from the original plans. So being dynamic and putting some of these mechanisms in place to be able to address those issues on the fly is really going to, I think, serve our efforts well. So just some logistics. The maintenance contract is currently scheduled for a June procurement or letting. It will be in place by August, and we'll be ready to do some of the maintenance replacements by probably September. T and times integration, I kind of touched upon this. The initial device burn-in activities are underway, and we're getting positive feedback from that. Enforcement integration. So Adam touched upon DriveWise. Another commercial partner that we work with is called PrePass. Who wants to raise their hand if they know what PrePass is? Yeah, good job, good job. So we have some active coordination with the Tennessee Highway Patrol, Porter Hill, which is the vendor that's actually installing these, DriveWise and PrePass, so that those enforcement screenings can be in place once every one of the locations and sites are burn-in and at completion. And I've been told that this is a fairly easy process. They're like, we got it, we're good. So I'm excited to see how that's going to increase efficiency at waste stations across Tennessee. Okay, now let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about our oversized overweight office. One of the things that we talk about funds and how that affects freight here in Tennessee, our oversized overweight office has seen a dramatic increase every year in the amount of oversized and overweight vehicles that are coming through Tennessee, not just your typical 80,000 and under. Right now we're tracking at about $25 million in revenue to TDOT from oversized overweight permits. One of the things that we've had to do to meet that need is to update our TN trip system, which is the permitting system that our customers utilize. Part of that includes customer interface. So now the route issues, when someone applies for a permit, not only will they see that the route itself will allow for like horizontal clearance, but they'll also be able to see in advance that vertically that they can meet the restrictions to make that particular route. So it should improve efficiency and our automated approval. It's also going to improve structure, communication, and the customer routing information. So we'll be able to see a lot more information about the structures they're going to cross on the front end, so that we're not having a continuous back and forth and amending permit routes. It's also going to allow for a turn-by-turn navigation. That is currently still in the beta testing phase, but should be up in the next coming months. And this is largely due to TN Trips. Sure, Josh. TN Trips, sorry, somebody was joining. I don't know if that popped up for you. TN Trips had a mapping platform that's undergoing updates and enhancements. We currently issue 3,000 permits weekly. 70% of those are automated. The rest are a manual review between our team and the structures team at TDOT. One of the trends that we're seeing is that nearly 100 in the last 4 months, nearly 100 permits exceeded 650,000 pounds, the load, which is unheard of and is something that you would have seen, we saw in a 4-month period, but previously you would have seen in a 5-year period. So loads are getting bigger and more frequent as they come through Tennessee. And then just logistically, we're currently working to update our 5-year escrow contracts. And that's our contact information.
Thank you, Adam and Amy. I guess we're actually on schedule. Does anybody have any questions for them that they may want to ask? But in the meantime, one thing that I want to point out, that's the Rural Service Patrol. Remember this, wherever you are traveling in Tennessee, 511 or star 847. tell family, friends, anybody you know, because if you're that person that actually has a flat tire in these rural areas, it could be a lifesaver because as Adam mentioned, we want to clear those incidents as fast as possible because of distracted driving. So with that, Kathy, if you could come on up here, let's go ahead and transition to the PDF file, and then we'll start on the rail plan. While we transition, while Kathy gets that on the computer, I just want to say a couple more things about the work that Adam and Amy, you know, the commissioner, the direction's been laid out, as I mentioned in the opening comments. And it's really important to note that rural service patrols are being paid for by the state legislature that did a recurring state from the state budget. So it's not like one of those things that will go away next year or the next year or the next year. So really foresight from the legislature, Governor Lee. I'm really looking forward to a lot of these programs is really investing and putting the best use of your tax dollars going forward. Keith, do you want to come on up and share?
There was a question too.
Nope. Go here and click on. Hang on 1 second here while we get the file up. Preston, do you know what we're doing here?
We're just trying to get it to share.
That's where I went to.
I think it's a good time to get one Academy Spring still.
It's not there.
You see it? Yes.
There we go. All right. And then, you know, proceed.
Sorry about that.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Keith Buckley with HDR. We're the consultant team that worked with Dan and Kathy to develop the state rail plan. And this was completed in January. I'm losing track of time already. January, and it's been submitted to the FRA. So for those of you that have been attending the Freight Advisory Committee meetings the last year, we gave updates during that. So, and I'll just check for all those virtual, if you're able to see and hear okay. I don't know if, I'm assuming they're able to track with that. Are they allowed to put something in the chat if they cannot? Okay, good. So, I'll go to the next. Okay. Am I not set? Should be able to do it up and down now. Okay. It's a good thing we've got Preston as our IT guy. It's really helpful here. So we'll hit on some highlights as we go through this, and I'll stop a few times if anybody's got any questions. I'm going the wrong way already. So the state rail plan, Tennessee DOT is the agency that sets policy. In the first and the third bullets, they're a little bit similar, that sets the policy, priorities and strategies for rail, both freight and passenger rail in the state. And then the last two listings there talk about what's required in the way of projects or programs to be eligible for different funding sources. And then up to the second bullet, the FRA wants state DOTs to update or develop a completely new rail plan every 4 years. And TDOT submitted that in March, and we are waiting on FRA at this point to let us know to get any feedback. So the state rail goals are listed here, and these support the long-range transportation goals and tie in with the state freight plan, which was developed about 2.5 years ago. The first one being to support and enhance rail asset preservation, which really we're talking about, we got to take care of what we got, and supporting it, and it's primarily private sector. But taking care of what we got. The goal 2 is safety and security. It's actually two different things there. Safety is the one we talk about the most, with public safety at rail crossings and even the railroad industry itself. Goal 3, and this is something Commissioner Reed talked about, an efficient and effective, reliable movement of goods, and that's the goal here. And below each one of these, we have objectives listed. I'm not going to spend time with those. Goal number 4, economic development, which, it's about freight movement. If freight's not moving, the economy's not moving. That's just bottom line to it. And then finally, there are impacts, freight impacts to the environment, to communities. And so we address those as well. Stakeholder engagement. We've discussed, we had one-on-one conversations with each of the Class 1 railroads, Norfolk Southern, CSX, and Canadian National. Those 3 in particular. There are 3 others, but they have very limited mileage in Tennessee, so we did not engage them. They were involved in the second to the bottom, the Tennessee Railroad Association. They joined that conversation. And we discussed with WeGo, and then we've met with most of the short line railroads. They have a quarterly meeting, and we addressed it with those. So we've covered a lot of folks. We've been in the Freight Advisory Committee meeting for a couple years. So there was quite a bit of stakeholder input there. And so there was quite a few different plans and studies that we looked at to help inform, what was doing. I'd mentioned the Tennessee Long Range Transportation Plan, the previous rail plan that was developed back in 2022, I believe, or 23. The state freight plan, which we worked with Dan to develop that, and a number of other plans and studies that had been developed within the last 3 to 5 years to draw out information to support what we were doing. So on to freight rail. Here's Tennessee's rail system. It's highlighted by, as you can see, the Class 1 railroads, CSX, Norfolk Southern, and then down the western part of the state, the green line is Canadian National. Those are the three Class 1 railroads that are very prominent, and then three others, as you can see over on the Memphis blow up with BNSF, UP, and CPKC, where they do connect. And the Memphis area is a big connection point. 22 short line railroads are shown there in red. So that's pretty much the rail system here in Tennessee. Intermodal facilities, we're showing the ones here primarily in Memphis. You have there's one with Canadian National, the Rossville one there is Norfolk Southern. BNSF has one. The one over in Marion, Arkansas is actually the UP. And then here in Nashville is the CSX intermodal yard. In the freight plan, there's also additional maps that show other rail yards because a lot of those are bulk transfer type facilities and not intermodal, but we're not particularly showing that map in this presentation here. So on to passenger rail. The existing intercity passenger rail route is what they call the City of New Orleans. This origin in Chicago and goes to New Orleans. And there are 2 stations in Tennessee, as you can see those depicted there on this particular route. But this is the only intercity passenger rail route currently in Tennessee. And ridership, we'll discuss that. You can see during the pandemic, it dropped off quite a bit. The high back in 2017, I'll focus on the Tennessee ridership, was at 77,000 in 2017. It dipped off in 2021 and 22 due to the pandemic and a lot of other restrictions. It has started to climb back up. When we finished the rail plan, actually with the information in December, we only had data for 2024. And just in the last 2 weeks, we went out and got the 2025 data that you're seeing here. And it actually tapered, it dropped a little off into 2025. It's just down a little bit, not astronomically, but it's just to bring this chart up to being a little more current. The commuter line that operates between downtown Nashville and all the way out to the east in Lebanon. This is that current system. A total of 7 stations operate that, and it's, once again, this has been doing very well. Once again, back in 2020, when the ridership was extremely high, the pandemic had dropped off. Prior in doing the rail plan, we only had the data out to 2024. We did go out and grab the 25 data, and you can see in the last year, it's increased significantly on the WEGO line. So that was a big plus up there. The passenger rail corridor ID program has been ongoing for a couple of years. The one that has the most prominent effort on it here for Tennessee is the current Memphis, Nashville, Chattanooga, Atlanta, and that one's moving along. It's through the step 1, looking to go to the step 2, which we'll talk about the service and all the implications that go with that. There's a 4-step process to that corridor ID program. Another one that's being talked about is Nashville up to Cincinnati. That's a proposal that may come into effect the next time around. And there's a few others. We're showing that Washington DC to Bristol once again. That one's being talked about. Parts of that are in the program, and then there could be other parts at some point in the future that come into Tennessee. So that program is progressing very well. I'll stop there if anybody's got any questions, issues, so I don't keep rambling on, just in case to give somebody a chance to.
Can I ask
Once-
you, this is
Yes,
a
sir.
question about freight rail.
Yes, sir.
Just curious, there's not a direct connection of freight rail between Nashville and Knoxville. What's sort of the history behind that? There doesn't seem to be a direct connection. Repeat the question.
Okay. The question was asked on freight rail, direct connection, a lack of direct connection between Nashville and Knoxville. Yeah, I'm not sure I've got the answer to that. Hey,
There was a history there.
yeah, there was a history there. A discontinuance of just a lack of requirement, I think. I'd have to go back and look and see on the history of that one in particular. I'm a little stumped on it, but yeah,
Just curious.
okay. I hadn't thought about it. Anybody else? Okay, we'll go into safety. This is an area that's always, very closly watched but it's the same in roadway. I mean, safety is very important. And here, over the last 10 years, we're talking about the different types of safety incidents and accidents that have occurred. The total numbers in the dark blue, the fatalities, the light green, and the number of injuries. Way back in 2015, it spiked. There was a CSX derailment. That was a hazmat type incident that included fire. So there was a lot of respiratory type injuries. That was just a single case. It was almost, I think, close to right around 200 of those injuries with that one incident. So that was a spike. But as you can see, it's pretty much even over the last 10 years. And if when you get a chance to look into the rail plan, you look at ag grade rail crossings and things like that. And, when we look at the state, there's over 2,700 public rail crossings, and half of those have a active warning device, being gates, lights, flashing lights, but 50% do not. 50% have the crossbucks or stop sign. Now, a lot of those are more rural. I understand that. Less traffic, and people that live in those areas are aware they exist. But and possibly that, as we talk about, potential projects in the future, identifying any of those crossing locations where there's more critical problems that could be addressed. But so that's the statistics there. The type of rail accidents, a lot of those involve derailments, a large percentage across the state. And if you look at the middle one, most of those actually occurred on the railroad's property in yards where they're turning and doing various things. So it's not out. The majority are not out on the main rail line to where they're affecting the public directly. Okay. So I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. I'm just trying to, be objective about it. And the causes, as you can see, human factors are involved. That's big. And equipment, and of course, track condition. It happens. So those are just some highlight. There's more stuff in the actual rail plan itself. So on to the economic impacts. A lot of jobs, a lot of employment involved in Tennessee, close to 35,000 that are direct jobs. These are Class 1 railroads. These are positions within the private sector that handle loading and unloading of rail cars, rail car repair, a lot of those things directly involved in the railroad industry. So it's a very large amount, $5.4 billion in earnings, and you can see it's 2% of the state's GDP, but it does bring in a high amount of almost $760 million in revenue. So it has a definite economic impact here in Tennessee. Some of the key supply chains, and this is a point that Commissioner Reed brought up about the economic development, and if you look at the state seal of Tennessee, right across the middle of it, it says agriculture and commerce. So that plays right into what it's all about. These are some of the key supply chains. Automotive has grown tremendously in recent years in Tennessee. I think the first one I recall was back when GM built that Saturn plant at Spring Hill. I think that was a kind of a kickoff, but you can see what's happened since then. Look at the number of automotive plants that have come in, and they're continuing to do very well here. The one out in Western Tennessee, Blue Oval will eventually get taken off. I know with electrification, there's been some delays there, but that's growing. Some of the other key industries with all different types of plastics and chemicals, just a huge variety of things there. Advanced manufacturing, this is a variety of different manufacturing type activities that are not automotive, but there are a variety of other things. And of course, agriculture continues to be big. And then there's other things like aggregates. There are coal shipments both in and out, and a lot of other type aggregates that we're not showing here. So, but it is about the economic impact. And, when you're moving a lot of heavy stuff, you want your lowest cost mode of transportation. If you try to move a lot of this by truck, you're not as economically competitive. So that's why rail is important to these industries. The distribution, a little bit different than the rest of the nation. Tennessee relies about 10 percentage points more than the nation on trucking. Okay. And you can see on the rail side, it's only 4%. So it's a smaller percent. And a lot of that is because directly, rail is more of a pass-through for the state of Tennessee. It's a pass-through. And it's not only Tennessee, a lot of other states are that way too. So we just want to show this distribution. You are more heavily reliant on truck, but to those industries that need this, it's critical. It's absolutely critical. So, and once again, by movement by share on the left, this is showing both tonnage and the carload units. Pass-through is 2/3 of the volume. Okay, a lot of that is coal and a lot of other high volume of aggregate products. Now, outbound and inbound are somewhat balanced, but your inbound is, let me look at this correctly, 17% of the total rail activity, and outbound is 13%. So a lot of, and keep in mind, this is by tonnage. And so a lot of that's aggregates. And things like if we were to show, and I'm not showing it here, if we were to show by value, automotive would be a lot higher because it's not as heavy as coal and aggregates, but its values is significantly more. So I think it's a caveat I need to bring out, because when you're dealing with automotive, 80% mostly of automobiles leave the assembly plants on rail because they go to places 500, 600, 1,000 miles away. So rail's really critical to automotive, just to show you some sort of a highlight there. Commodities by traffic, coal is big, both in and out. Chemicals, we've already talked about some of these, food products, and other aggregates. And then by tonnage, automotive would be in that other category. A car may weigh 2 tons, but in the bigger scheme of things, you only get on a rail car about 12 on there. So tonnage wise, it's not as heavy as an aggregate car. Okay, so we get to the end. We've discovered all the things that what are the needs and issues that are occurring with rail. So some of the things we talked about with the Class 1 railroads, they are concerned about the equity tax fund. That is a fuel tax that's levied on the Class 1s, and it's a concern of theirs. A lot of that funding goes to the short line railroads for improvements. Encroachment of residential and commercial development near and on almost adjacent to their tracks. That causes, some environmental issues, community issues, and that's a concern to them. The last two are very similar. It's sort of where roadway bridge operations either go under or over their rail lines. They're just concerned that on the roadway side, that those are maintained so that nothing happens that affects their rail operations. That's what those last two bullets really talk about there. For short line railroads, it's trying to improve the quality of the rail so they can go from a level 1 up to a level 2, travel a little bit faster, and with 286K being able to take on heavier loads, because those, as we all know, short lines are connected to the Class 1 railroads. So they want to be able to handle businesses that have really heavy quantities of stuff instead of 268,000 up to 286, which is the industry standard. Consistent annual allocation of funding is important to them, and that's not unlike DOT as well. You want to be able to see far out as you can with your funding so that you can plan your projects. If you don't know what that funding is in 6-7 years out, it's difficult to plan the project. You want to be able to complete it, and that's kind of what they're saying there. Feasibility of state tax credits they're interested in, and then rehabilitating the existing lines to meet new standards, and transload facilities. Once again, if they can transload something from truck to rail, it's a cheaper transportation mode and helps them to be more competitive in the industry that they're in. Logistics costs are across the country, about 9% of GDP. So if you can ratchet down your logistics costs in any way, shape, or form, you remain more competitive. And that's really important to these guys. Their short line railroads are a very low margin industry. They really are. They're kind of a niche. They serve one or two businesses along their line. So it's very important to them. Press here, proposed freight rail improvements. We put these together in groups. A lot of these are listed in the rail plan. Grade separated crossings, the more you have there, you don't have block crossings, you reduce the safety risk that you have there, and it makes it more operational. Being able to work with businesses for rail spurs and sidings into industrial sites to be able to put freight directly on rail, if possible. And then the intermodal yard development, the more efficient they make those, the faster they can turn product. And then of course, 286K upgrading there. And then Chrissy funded short range projects. There's several there ongoing. The one I'll make mention on is second to the bottom with the short line railroads. That's a total of 42 bridges that are being rehabbed on 10 different short line railroads. And I wrote down the amount that it's showing the total amount there of 47 million. That's the total package. Federal grant is 50% of that, and state funding is 45%, and then the railroads themselves is 5%. A lot of those bridges are old, and that is the Achilles heel for many of the short lines. On their line, one bridge can stop them cold, and you guys are freight people, so you understand that. So getting these 42 bridges up and going is going to set these short line railroads up for the next 50, 60 years to be efficient and functional, and more resilient. I'll use that word, more resilient. Class 1 railroads improvements, again, they interject billions of dollars every year into their capital program. Norfolk Southern recently, I think it's been a year and a half, maybe 2 years, purchased the line from actually the city of Cincinnati for the line that runs all the way to Chattanooga. Norfolk Southern was running on it the entire time anyway, but now they own it. So they're doing some more improvements to that now that they actually own it. Canadian National is adding new infrastructure investments, and once again, the Class 1s continue to partner with TDOT to improve grade crossings on the Class 1 side. 3 out of those 4 bullet points deal with improving the Class 2 up to track speed so they can go faster, and 286K. And then RJ Corman, we had a side conversation with them concerning the Cumberland River Bridge that they are rehabbing, which is a big project for them. Proposed passenger rail, we're focused on the corridor ID program. We've already talked about that. There is Amtrak is constantly studying their long distance routes. It was recently announced their federal funding. It's elevated a little bit across the country, not a huge amount, but it's not going down. We'll put it that way. Improvements on WeGo, and then upgrade on that Chattanooga incline railroad as well. Proposed the passenger rail. Once again, it's equipment because passengers that ride Amtrak, some of them go a short distance, some of them go a longer distance. If they're traveling Chicago to New Orleans, for example, that's a couple, it could be a couple day event. So things like, having modern assets and services on those passenger rails are very important to them. Different types of food service and customer improvements to improve that experience, and actually make it more reliable. And they're constantly, behind the scenes working with the Class 1 railroads to keep their speed up to certain levels and being able to have better track access. That's an ongoing issue that they have. I'll stop there and open that up to questions, answers. Hopefully the rail plan will be posted. We're waiting on FRA to accept that, and it's a Pulitzer Prize winner. Please go out and read it, go through it. So any comments or questions, be glad to entertain for anything at all.
I just have a
other than the question that you stumped me on.
no, I mean, how many, I guess, short lines are there, and are there any that are in particular financial distress or anything like that? They're pretty good.
22 short lines, right? You remember, Matthew? We were kind of lumping some of the tourist ones in there. Am I 22?
Go back and forth a little
Right.
bit on how.
I know. There's always ballpark of 22. I'll say ballpark of 22.
Any financial issues with any of them? Are they?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, they're very limited. Obviously, they rely on the freight that's currently doing it, and that's why it's so important for like the Railroad Transportation Equity Fund to help them out.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, I'll get into it a little bit later in the comments and talk about it, but the state legislature this past year was amendment, and they got $20 million. We typically, over the last 5 years, have given $20 million of funding by Governor Lee's administration and the legislature, and that is kind of beefed up to their needs are great though.
Sure.
So, for example, there's a current round of Chrissy grant applications out there,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we're up to 5 letters of support for various future. So they're trying to get it while the money's good and on the federal dollars, and it's a great example of leveraging state dollars with federal dollars and private investment to do it. Yes, Donna?
I have a question, because I don't know. On
Sure.
the safety side, you mentioned that there's a lot of the accidents are caused because of the tracks, and that is just what it is. Who's responsible to inspect those tracks, make sure that they're not?
Good. So the question was asked for the people online, that who's responsible to look at, since the number one form of derailments typically in the yards that Keith mentioned in his presentation, who's responsible for that? So the actual railroads are responsible for that because they're private entities, although they could be publicly held. So they're responsible for that. However, in one of the presentations later today by Eric, we do have staff that go out and look at the rail safety to protect the railroad employees and then also protect the traveling public. So if you stick around right after the break, Eric's going to cover that in the scheme of things.
Couple online questions.
Okay. This is going to answer the online questions. I'm going to read it.
I don't have my glasses,
No.
Dan.
The question was, did you mention when the rail plan will be available online? Yeah, it should be online very soon. What it is, the process is 60 days FRA review, and that's in that process, and we're about at like 58 days. So it's going to be very soon. And the document, I can't remember off the top of it. This is an extensive document, 200. How many pages was it? 67? I can't remember.
It was
200.
about 200.
200-page document. And I think it's important for everybody to realize, both online and in the room, this is just the rail plan. We also are required by federal law, IIJA, to do a freight plan as well. So I don't want to make it sound like that this is just one aspect. So if you're wondering why the other modes were not included in this, it's more everything affecting the rail piece of it as we go forward. Another question online, which tax goes into the Transportation Equity Fund? That fund is generated by locomotive fuel in the state of Tennessee that is fueled by that. It goes into a big account. Think of it this way: it goes in the account, and then that number is divvied up among the short lines. There is a lawsuit out there, so most of the fund, about 90% of that fund was generated by Class 1 railroads into the fund. There's a lawsuit that's been tied up since 2013, I think, or 2016. And so the money is going into escrow and they can't spend it. So typically it generates, by all the short lines that are putting into this fund, it generates about $3 million a year. The need, Jeff, is approximately 20 million. So you can see that big gap. So it's a constant, and I know we have some short lines online. It's a constant every year looking for the legislature to help out or somehow get those dollars in there. So I think I addressed everything online. Thank you. Oh, another question online.
Do those rail bridge repairs, replacement include earthquake hardening?
The question is, do the rail bridge replacements include earthquake hardening? I would, this is where I would refer to the specific short lines and Class 1s that address that one. I do not know that answer. I'm assuming to a certain level, depending upon the earthquake, the size of the earthquake. However, I will also say that we actually put in a federal bill that we're going to be getting a new bridge connecting Memphis and Arkansas called King's Crossing. And in that case, it will be able to withstand like a 9-point earthquake, I think is the number. So today, if you're on that bridge and you're in an earthquake, I'd get off fast. But the I-40, what's referred to as the I-40 bridge over there, is earthquake resistant up to like a 9. And so the new bridge will, and that should be coming under construction pretty soon. Any other questions online, Kathy? I'll get with you.
So on the proposed line from Nashville to Cincinnati, has there been any surveying or geotechnical studies on soils with the company?
Sure. So the question in the audience was on the line that was showed on his slide for corridor ID to Nashville up to Cincinnati. That proposal has not been done yet. And the whole process, I'll get to it when I talk here after break. but I'll talk a little bit about where we are in the Sun Belt Atlantic coalition. And I think that'll probably set the stage. And it's as Keith mentioned, it's a 4-step process. We are still in step 1 on that, but it's about to be released, and then we're going to go into step 2. But hold that question or pay attention when I'm going to talk on that a little bit deeper. Thank you. And then a question about the Memphis trolleys. Are there any update you can share regarding the trolleys in Memphis? They are trying, thanks David, that's a question online. They're trying to get them back up and running. There's some caps that they have to fix before we can do that and get a plan on how they're going to get redundancy braking in there. So David, I know that that's been a long process to get through it, and we're working through all that, but there are some items that need to be addressed before we can get back in service. And there's a 6-month leeway on that. They're not ready for the 6 month, because the 6 month, just like in the review of the corridor ID, we have to have a plan, and then 6 months is all the things that need to happen and implement so that that all the people that are riding the trolleys are protected and the safe and efficient movement of people in the Memphis area. One more question. Another question about Memphis. Memphis is an incredibly strategic node on the national freight logistics system for rail, passenger, and waterborne. Is there a master plan to facilitate intermodality as part of this? That's from Edward online. Yes, there is. There's actually several things that we have done over the years. And a lot of these are on the website. The National Economic Partnership really looked at the intermodality of the area and what strong points they have and how can they leverage that for future business in the area. So that is on our website, and you can reach out to me individually and I can share that with you. Also, the Memphis MPO has a freight study and freight plan for that specific area. But as you're well aware of in Memphis, what happens, and Keith covered in his presentation, if you look at the freight flows in Memphis, there's an intermodal yard on the Arkansas side of the river, and that the NS Rossville yard is right. You have to go through Mississippi to get to that yard. So it truly does not know state boundaries. So, all right, I think we covered all the questions online. Now is the time for the proverbial break. We're pretty much on time. We're going to give 10:05 is when we'll start back up again. For those in the room, please eat a donut. There's only one thief in here, and I want all those donuts gone so that I don't take them home. So we'll be back with you online at 10:05, and I will talk after that. Thank you. Yes. So now. Okay. I did. I stopped sharing, but what I want to do. I don't know. I don't understand her filing system. I'm looking for her. Sent individual. Yeah, I just want to make sure this. Share.
Yeah, I'm not a freight guy, but you're representing today. Even involved. I just saw that, yeah. There'd be a bunch of people there. Good, I appreciate it, yeah. Sure we are, but I'm not aware of it.
I'll have my local contact.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's just probably.
For sure, I'd be. Speaking about keeping, I mean, I have actually developed my.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I mean, this is sort of.
Yeah, that's what.
Sure, that's a great idea. It's not working, I know a lot of times. University, that has to go through much first.
Serena's with us with free.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Freezing.
Yeah. I'll usually go, so.
You know, Liza here to talk about the gap. We just could have had you do the story.
Definitely not
The
gonna
gap
place I know
between
the
Nashville
but
and
I know
Knoxville
there are
Rail.
like research projects, but actually something I think there has to be.
There's been a giant study about it, probably about 20 years ago.
Oh, yes. I know, we don't do
Yeah, that
Well, appreciate
It's right, we have,
A stronger supply chain. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I did. Yeah. He's got it now. We also. It was pretty fun. We got all. Yeah. But it's not, I'm. There's a top. I like your microphone. Yeah. I That's probably the hardest part, right? It is marvelous on the road. Yeah, and we find that it's not similar to the, the micro, is, as because that's only like, micro consolidation. You also use it as a retail facility. You can drop off package. But I can fit it.
I'd love to, yeah, I got your card, I'll take it. You're in Knoxville, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll actually be up there, I guess my son-in-law, my daughter live there, so, yeah. That's something we're trying to get into.
Far less.
It's
He does like probably 2 trips a year to Key West. That's his favorite place.
Oh, yeah.
Next week, hey, I just got this. Bam. Yesterday. I just, my computer and my laptop, is all my stuff. What if I do it? So how's Mary's? It's been 2 years. It just seems like it was yesterday. You can.
My question's on. I would have to take it.
I saw your brother there.
Yeah.
Advice me. I'm gonna go. He says it's great time. So I've been asked to fight.
You got it right. You got one of these.
It's like an involuntary. People use it for not taking any time, but it's not being charged. So, they're better do.
So it wasn't any situation.
We have. We have one manager. So there's a lot of. Not to mention
Good.
I guess, sorry, I'm trying to figure out
Yeah, and the simplicity of the 511, I mean, I tell you. Yeah. And, you know, what was happening is.
You guys go to, that. And so they would engineer building.
Yeah. And then 511.
Oh, what do you mean, like research wise? I didn't end up doing research. So I actually had to answer Joe's question about why the surface was like. It's really just geographic.
Right, yeah. They were. That says.
All the Amtrak stuff and a lot of discrete obviously. Really up until 42, and then you have decline ridership. There's an increase to the mid-50s and a decline. And then this all information at the National Archives site, but it's one is by Annapolis. So yeah, there used to be a lot of money. I forget what they used to call that.
So I don't know. Get out and get my.
Permitted, also, and a lot of other. Get out.
I remember that actually.
That's what I have with guardrails. Automobile.
He said, I think I'm on the way.
No, so it's a complex. I actually had 2 bachelor's degrees. I'm finishing a final one. I got sick and I got better.
Yeah.
So I've actually got 2 years left.
Let me ask you this exactly.
It's a good question. I was in
But.
Got a plan. I guess it was.
And on my way back, I drove, right off. And I'm like, yeah, straight up. And I'm like, I parked so hard, all of a sudden, all the sensor lights came on.
Canada's got dry weather, so, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
A lot of Arctic. Sure. Lots of snow.
All right. Can y'all hear me online? See a thumbs up or something?
She's fine. They were all the same. Oh, okay. Okay, good. I'll go later today.
All right.
So you called me last
We'll
night?
go ahead.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
that's
why.
why it was, you need to do that back.
What?
You muted that.
Is that the other? I think you were coming from.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and get cranked up again. I am Dan Palmy, and I am the Assistant Bureau Chief of Planning, or the Director of the Passenger Transportation, Rail and Freight.
Not because I finished, it's only sexual. Yeah. But he really likes me.
Thanks. Kathy back there. All right, we're getting the next document up. See, go down. Right. All right. And so I'm going to be talking to the next 25 minutes or so on the department. But the one takeaway, if you have one takeaway about my part of this presentation as I was going through it, this is all the things that we're doing in 2026. So as you look at it, a lot of times when we have a plan and we go move forward, just think of this is the current stuff we were doing. You know, Amy talked a little bit about Way in Motion that's been going on about 5 years, and now we're up to the implementation. But I want to really let everybody, the takeaway for everybody's takeaway as I go through this is really how we're trying to move fast on a lot of these things. And the main reason is because the depreciation of the dollar on everything that we do. So we got to almost go 100 miles an hour to get there, implement, and then decide what we're going to do. So I'm going to go through some of the highlights here. All right. I didn't do this normally. Whenever you're in a meeting with me, I always start off, since I'm starting to talk, we'll talk a little bit about safety. Safety is what drives DOT. I think a lot of times we get caught up in all these programs, but at the end of the day, it's really about everybody in this room, everybody online going home safe. So if you look at it, what I did is I ran these numbers as of yesterday. So overall safety, and then I think the thing exciting for me as we start going, and I'm going to have several slides on autonomous and AI and connected vehicles. But I think the interesting thing is if you look at some of the safety numbers that we've had over the years, is that since 2020, everybody was speeding, our fatalities went off the charts. So if you look at overall, when it comes to the safety, we have 336 fatalities in 2026 as compared to 387. Last year, we had about the same reduction. So everything's going good on that. I think it's the wish always that at some point we'll be vision zero and we'll have zero fatalities going forward. But we're going to be a few years away from that as a nation. Pedestrians and the pedestrians 58 is compared to 63, so a slight decrease. Last year we had a tremendous decrease, which is a positive. The one thing that I always talk about with staff, the thing that blows my mind is that statistics have shown that if you buckle up and you go 35 miles an hour, that you're going to survive a vehicle accident. So 38% so far year to date are people that are simply not buckling up when they get in the car. So if there's one message here, the takeaway, buckle up as you drive. Unfortunately, large trucks, you can kind of see we've had 51 versus 45. This is large truck and bus for a 12% increase. Motorcycles and ATVs and other 58 and 26 compared to 63 and 25 for an 8% increase. Good news there on teen drivers. Obviously, that's very sad. If you have a person that's 13 to 19 and they die as a fatality in a car accident, 28 versus 39 for a 28% decrease. And then senior drivers, as you see the age of America continue to rise, age 65 and above. We've had 96 year to date as compared to 92 in 2025 for a 4% decrease. So the commissioner mentioned it real quick in passing. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. I know Preston's going to go in more of a deep dive in it, but what is choice lanes? I think most of the audience in here, although we do have some people from Knoxville in the room, I think they know what the choice lanes are, and it's 26 miles on I-24 that's between basically just north of I-40 or I-840 up to Fessler's Lane and Briley Parkway. The one thing that I think is very important that everybody needs to also realize is that the American Trucking Association, through their research arm, does a bottleneck analysis, and Tennessee is tied for the fourth most bottlenecks in the state, following Texas, Georgia, and we're tied with a small little state called California. So if you look at that, it's truly tremendous that we have to work on these things. This actually, choice lanes should alleviate some of these bottlenecks, as most of them are in the Nashville area. The final RFP is complete. Proposals were due last month that we are going through now, and the commercial close is scheduled for July of this year. It's estimated a $4.5 billion project. Just to put that in a little bit perspective, the entire budget for TDOT that we use for construction, that piece of it is $1.2 billion. So you can see we have, this is by far going to be the biggest project in the history of TDOT. And I wanted to take a little minute. So what does that mean? And how does that work between the developer and TDOT? So if you think about what is TDOT responsible when it comes to the choice lanes, we are the contracting entity. We are the project sponsor and manager. We will still do roadway operation and maintenance on the general purpose lanes only. There will be, we'll have to get a user fee authority. We are going to have a commercial back office and customer service operations. And if you think about it, we have to do that other thing of violation processing and enforcement. On the other side of the equation is what is the developer responsible for? He or they are responsible for the financing piece of it, the design and construction, roadway operation and maintenance, specifically on the choice lanes, the user fee roadside systems, and user fee operational back office, i.e. image processing, congestion pricing, in trip building. It's going to be, if it's so mind-boggling to think of how fast this choice lanes has moved. But we still have a lot more work to do as it goes forward. And then from a freight perspective, great freight and transit that reports through me. They can utilize the choice lanes for the efficient method of using people and goods through the city, but then also the rail connectivity. So we're at a lot of meetings that we've had on an every week basis to make sure that doing these projects, when we're set for construction starting next year, that all these projects you coordinate with the rail entities to make sure we don't have any delays, both on the project and then both for them as well. The next subject I want to talk about is the button fell off. The next project I want to talk about is the General Assembly actually gave the department $165 million as a general fund transfer to update some of these welcome centers and rest areas. And I think this is a great audience to talk about. What exactly it was for is kind of open, a little open-ended. If this is going to be a project that's going to be both through TDOT, the Department of Tourism, as we go and work on updating some of these, modernizing some of the facilities. We're going to upgrade some of the infrastructure in and around there, replace some of these outdated facilities, enhance traveler experience, and support state infrastructure priorities. Some of the rest areas will be closed. Some of the most inefficient ones that we have a couple that are so deteriorated, and frankly, the sewer is going to cost more to keep the thing open, so we have to shut them down. But then we're going to look at it, and the big benefit from a freight perspective in Tennessee is it should add, I think initial estimation is 114 parking spots, additional parking spots to help our trucking brethren as we go through. And then I wanted to talk about, Adam mentioned it in his part of the presentation, but I wanted to talk a little bit about performance-based maintenance partnerships. And so I won't read this to you, I probably should. But I think it's a new agreement that we're seeing. We've already installed this in the Nashville area. We're doing it in West Tennessee that just recently. But what it is, it's a performance-based contract that if you noticed, you may have noticed around that we have a lot of people that are going out and picking up different things of trash, looking at guardrail, roadside vegetation, traffic services, different things of that nature. It is really about beautifying some of the urban areas, both and as I mentioned, in Nashville, now Memphis. We've had incredible, great publicity on this. Obviously, could it always be better? Yes, but it's performance-based. So if you see something, they don't get paid unless they're doing it. We monitor them, then we assess periodically. So it's really kind of an interesting contract. And I think you're going to see that also go to region, to the Chattanooga area and Knoxville. But it's really about cleaning up the urban area, and really another benefit that we had under this administration going forward. I want to talk a little bit about the passenger rail efforts. I know we have several people online. The actual lead of the project is the city of Chattanooga. Keith mentioned it in his portion. The step one status, we should hear any day now, I think. If the city of Chattanooga I hadn't checked my emails today, so maybe they have. But how the state's involved is that I'm the representative for the state of Tennessee. We have a similar one in the state of Georgia. We have representations by all the major cities and this is probably, I should have talked first of all, it is that slide that Keith had, Atlanta, Chattanooga to Nashville to Memphis, and that's the actual route. And it's really about pushing that project through. It's called the Sunbelt Atlantic Coalition. And we meet, I know the next month is the next meeting to go over the bylaws. So it's really been I applaud the city of Chattanooga. It's been a grassroots effort, and we continue to move that down the line. The next steps that I think you asked is what's the next steps for that? So in this case, for this specific project, we'll go to step 2. Budget's already been compiled by the city of Chattanooga. And the next step is that we'll start as soon as we get the approval on step 1. They're ready to go. And the purpose and need, alternative analysis, transportation planning, contextual planning, and core service development plan. And just so everybody knows, the FRA really dictates a lot on that process as we move forward. So I did want to just take a few minutes because passenger rail definitely, I wouldn't say it conflicts with rail. It's a partner with rail as we go through. So it's just something we have to work together as we really look at the safe and efficient movement of goods and services and people through the state. I think it's important to take a minute to, as I said in my opening comments, these are the things that are just going on right now. So real excited about the one of the things we have going on. This has just been awarded about 2 months ago in the Smart Freight Truck Pilot in Smith County. And what that is that the traffic operations, Amy and Adam, are kind of leading this effort up. It's really looking at 4 different technologies to see how do we measure what's at a truck parking spot, how many are available, what are we using to get that information, then how are we communicating that to the truck driver. So what we're going to do is we're looking at LiDAR, radar, cameras, and sensors to really say how many spots are available, how do you communicate, and what is the best future for Tennessee to look to develop. So through that pilot, I really hope to get some additional funding. And then as we expand that pilot all through Tennessee, look at how we can communicate. Because the truckers, the one thing they want to know is not only is there a parking spot, but is it available is the critical, crucial thing as we go forward. So you got to have enough spots. And while I mentioned the pilot that we're doing there, stay tuned. We've started construction on that Smith County, where we're adding 125 new additional truck parking spots that's needed, obviously, as a big ticket item on the federal levels going forward. I put down how quick and fast moving this is. Last quarter, a company called Gaddick came to town. As a matter of fact, Commissioner and Preston, we were out here watching a demonstration on that. It's basically going to move its box trucks that are fully autonomous. They have a driver in them as of right now, but they're fully autonomous, and they'll be going from a DC to a store, going right by a weigh scale. And so how does that develop? So we really have been communicating not only with TDOT, but the Region 1 out in the Knoxville area, also Tennessee Highway Patrol, emergency response, all those different people and touches that could be affected. Once again, this is the speed of how this is going. I will explain in the next one. A company called Stack reached out to us on Thursday saying they're going to have operations start on Friday. So if you think about how fast it is, this is a fully autonomous. The plan for this is a full 53-footer. The customer is a major online retailer that they're going to do, and their routes, it's coming quick. Their routes are going to be Atlanta to Memphis and then Atlanta to Nashville. As of this stage, they have drivers in the vehicle, but I think it's important as we as a DOT really look at technology and how fast it's coming, and not how we can be a barrier, but how we can make them succeed. Because at the end of the day, and Preston and I were on a call where they did some scenario planning with a fully autonomous carrier. And every time they did the scenario planning with all the variables in it, in every situation, there were no accidents that they had. They did have 2 accidents, and it was both caused by passenger vehicles that ran into them. So looking forward to the future when it comes to autonomous and connected vehicles. And the one thing that I think is a perfect segue into the next thing is a smart freight corridor that we piloted. The legislature last year gave us some money to really pilot this, and it took a while to post this, to get it going. It was awarded just 2 months ago. In March, Cabnew is going to be the provider, And if you look at it, it's going to be the first dedicated smart freight initiative to test smart freight technologies in real world conditions, giving TDOT the data and insights needed to shape long-term freight modernization strategies for Tennessee. Really excited about this. It seems like that so many times, if you've heard me speak before, I always talk about how I'd like to get and steal, rip off other ideas from other states. This is one where we're really trying to lead the nation and trying to get what type of analysis can we get from all the data that they're given to really make a safe and efficient segue. So if you're not familiar with West Tennessee and the Smart Freight Corridor, there's a little company called Blue Oval that's going to start operations. They're located on mile marker 42, and it's 2 lanes all the way from mile marker 16 all the way to 79. And so this is really look like we know we have a barrier. We can't afford to widen 60 lanes immediately to this. So what can we get from the data that will show different techniques, different policies, different items out there to get the safe and efficient movement of goods. You can kind of read detailed corridor and infrastructure analysis, developing the pilot's concept of operations and designs to see if we can duplicate that. They're going to temporarily install vehicle-based technologies, real-time data that we can get to our TMC and get people out there immediately, as Adam talked on his items of doing it fast to prevent secondary crashes, and then stakeholder engagement. We've already reached out to some of the, what I would say, the more technical advanced truckers in the area. The pilot, through that, we hope to improve safety and reduce congestion, support connected freight applications, enhance incident response, and inform long-term planning and statewide freight modernization strategies. And I think that's where the smart DOTs need to get to really look at it holistically, like one of the questions that was asked. The pilot is supposed to run through 2028. We should be starting, as soon as we agree on the contract language, we'll be implementing that ASAP. So excited on the future when it comes to smart freight corridor. Other items that we are monitoring, and I know that Preston's going to be talking about some of these things, but I think I just wanted a general takeaways from my few minutes up here. But I want to really talk about one of the charges that Preston's given me is, okay, how do we leverage any of these federal grants going out there? We leverage anything that we can leverage with federal dollars is really like putting money in the bank. So anytime we do that, so we look up, we have an extensive review of what projects that we need to do at the state, and then how do we implement it. So if we have a limited dollars here, when we can get this project, let's go for that project. And that's one of the things that we're doing. So we are currently looking at supplying, I think, 3 different grants that we're doing on the federal level to really leverage the taxpayer dollars in Tennessee as we go forward. I talked earlier in my comments, since a question was asked about the short line $20 million transfer to Railroad Transportation Equity Fund. A lot of that's managed by the Freight Planning Group that Eric will talk about here in a few minutes. If anybody online or in the audience needs letters of support, please get them to me, and I vet those before I give them to Preston for commissioner's signature. But we want you to be successful when it comes to letters of support. So please, please, please reach out and do that. We are in the last year of IIJA. It was just released. I think, Preston, are you talking about reauthorization as I skimmed you? Okay. Reauthorization, currently the House released their version late Sunday night. The amount of work, and I think that's another thing that the audience needs to know, the amount of work that a state DOT is doing behind the scenes. We've got consultants that are looking at every little thing in there to make sure that the version of the bill that passes is really beneficial to the state, or I should say not beneficial to the state, but beneficial to the taxpayers of Tennessee. So we've really kind of enhanced that. I think I've gotten about 10 different organizations that have looked at it and trying to make the best assessment, everything from how does that affect transit? How does that affect freight? How does that affect rail? How does that affect the bridge program? How does that affect safety? So all those different components, a lot bigger than digesting a document. By the way, put in perspective, that document today is 1,001 pages long. So if you want to do it, I actually have a copy. If you would like to review it yourself, feel free. And then I talked about bottlenecks earlier in a question that was asked. You know, unfortunately, we're in the top 4 of the top bottlenecks in America. That's a list you don't want to be on, but I do think we have programs. If you look at it from that perspective, we do have programs. We do have some ideas for federal grants to potentially reduce some of those bottlenecks as we go forward. But a good news, bad news. The good news is the state of Tennessee is growing. The bad news is with that comes congestion and different things. So the state, we're really trying to go through. And then further research. I know a couple people in here worked on some waterway research for me in the department that we just finished. Looking forward to future research. If you have any research ideas, please bring them to it. We not only do research as related to the railroad, waterways, or all that, but every other research, that pavements and different things of that nature. So all that research goes through Preston Elliott. So please, with the better research we have, the better we are as a state. And that brings up the last thing, and I didn't put it down here, is that we do have our freight on call that is posted now on the website. And several of the things that both HDR and HNTB are my current providers. They have worked on research projects for me, everything from economic analysis to truck parking, detailed analysis. But in the interest of time, I just really wanted to focus my comments strictly on what we've done in the past 5 months since 2026. So with that, here is my contact information. Does the audience or does the group have any questions for me? Donna.
The choice lanes,
Huh?
when it starts, you mentioned next year, how long you project it to take to be completed?
We think it'll take about 8 years of that project. There's a lot to that, and a lot of, it's not as simple as just widening an interstate, and that's not simple because you're going to have to bring elevation and go all around the different items. So probably by 2035 is the goal.
And are there any other choice lane projects?
As of right now, no. I do, we did a study on that actually, and it showed that. I'm going to relay that to Preston for his comments before I say something I can get in trouble with. Yeah, Jeff.
Any thinking you comment about the fee schedule for the choice lanes, any pricing?
I don't think that they've done some analysis, but I don't have that at the top. Oh, Preston's taking all the hard questions for me. That's good. Are there any questions online, Zach, or nope?
One more.
Yes, Don.
Parking spots?
Hmm?
State or?
Great question. They're going to be across the state. And I will tell you, Donna, there's probably going to be some that we're going to probably shut down and no access to because it's not a safe, I'm referring to, I probably shouldn't say, but let's just say in region 3 or 2. I'll talk to you offline about it. All right. With that, next up on the agenda is Eric Anderson. Just down.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. For those in the room, it's a little chilly in here, but we're going to make it. I'm going to say that we actually here in Middle Tennessee got a little rain recently, and that's good because we're actually getting into some drought conditions. So a little bit of a theme of my presentation here is how we're starting to grow some things in our office. I'm introducing what we call our freight planning, rail safety, and engineering office, and we've got freight and rail teams that I'm going to go over real quick. So in our freight planning team, you got an email from Kathy Combs. She's in the back of the room, and she is our team lead over our freight planning group. She's building her team up. If you take a look, we've got 3 new people. One remains unnamed because they're going to start in August, but also in the room, we've got Zarina Tinker. Raise your hand, yeah. And Zachary Fry, raise your hand. Yeah, there you go. So these are folks that are going to be growing with us. They are relatively new, but it's important to recognize that employees are expensive, and we're getting the investment from TDOT management to go and grow the program. So we're going to have more staff working on items. A lot of the activities include applications for the federal grants. As Dan mentioned, we've got an advertisement right now also for consultants. Just go to TDOT consultant advertisement. You can see it. But we're actually seeking some assistance in those, along with other freight activities. This team will also be going and handling the freight plan, our statewide multimodal freight plan. And as we are finishing up our rail plan, we're going to be looking at implementing some of the strategies that are talked in that. We are still going to continue implementing our rail preservation grant program. It was discussed, so the General Assembly was, with foresight, kind enough to go and give us a $20 million one-time allotment from the state funds. And so we will be able to go and disperse this grant fund again for another year. As Dan mentioned, though, the revenue that we get from the diesel tax on the locomotives is only about $3 million a year. So we're working through things, working closely with the Short Line Rail Association. But we will continue with that grant program to provide funds to assist them in preserving the track infrastructure. And then we also actually in this group have state safety oversight program. This is actually through the Federal Transit Administration. It's a oversight function that we have to do since TDOT receives funds from the Transit Administration, and that includes actually also for all our transit operations like buses too. But we have to go and oversee the trolley system over in Memphis and the incline railway over in Chattanooga. So we have a staff person that's fully trained, and with additional staff, we're getting some more trained folks on board to go and help with that. They oversee all the safety activities. They have to have plans in place to go and have their operations. And as Dan had mentioned, Memphis Trolley is not operating right at the moment, but we hear from them pretty often that they're enthusiastic on wanting to start again. So hopefully we can get through that process. In the rail engineering group, we're getting a new team lead. So this is the 4th new person that we're going to be getting. And we have 4 additional staff that have been on for a few years. This team actually goes and handles things like the FHWA Section 130 program that does the safety improvements at the at-grade railroad crossings in Tennessee. They look at all the crossings throughout the state, and we have to prioritize it because we don't have a whole lot of funds. And I'll just say this has been very difficult in the last just 5 years or so. Costs have almost doubled on going and doing lights and gates at a little 2-lane road. It's pretty expensive now. Usually we're expecting estimates in the neighborhood of $500,000 or $550,000 to put lights and gates there. And just a few years ago, it was more like $250,000, maybe $300,000. It's just gotten kind of expensive, but we are managing that program as we can, going and addressing safety concerns from local communities, and the railroad companies bring issues to us also. We also review all the highway projects near crossings for the state of Tennessee. So TDOT, we have our own projects, and also there's a lot of projects that go through local programs which have federal aid on them. So there's some federal regulations that we have to go and comply with. If they're at or even just near a railroad crossing, they have to have adequate warning devices. So this team goes and does a review and provides an assessment of, are they close? Do they have to do anything? And if they are close enough, what do they need to do to be in compliance? There's also a Tennessee fatality law. We don't try to do so much enforcement on that, but it exists in the sense if there's a crash at a railroad crossing and it doesn't have existing active warning devices like lights and gates, then they can be ordered by our commissioner. It's a bit of a burden though, because the way the law is set up, 1/3 of the cost is TDOT. So, okay, maybe we got the money. 1/3 of the cost is the railroad company. A lot of the public doesn't care so much on that, but it is a burden there too. And then 1/3 of the cost is actually on the local government, the city or county that railroad crossing is at. And that's a big deal when we're talking about their share might be a couple $100,000, and they just don't have that kind of money just sitting around for somebody to find something to spend it on. So we work within other things like the Section 130 program to provide funding at 100% if they'll work through the federal requirements to go through that program to get the safety improvements needed. We also handle approval of new public grade crossings. There's not too many, but every year there's usually at least 3 or 4 that are requested. And so this oftentimes is with developers that want to go across a railroad track to get that fine piece of acreage over there turned into their new development. But we are seeing a lot more partnering with cities in particular. So it's going a lot smoother in that process because there's a lot of other regulatory requirements that the cities may have about access where they don't want just one access in and out for emergency services and other activities. Finally, we also work with quiet zones. This is, again, typically a locally brought up issue. So a town or city says, hey, we don't want the trains sounding their horns. The Federal Railroad Administration has a whole process on going and analyzing if they can go and say you can get a quiet zone. The costs cannot be borne by federal dollars like the Section 130 program to make improvements, but we do participate in reviewing the crossings in the area of concern, analyzing with FRA what's needed to go and get a quiet zone and try to assist the locals on the technical side of if they want to pursue this, how to go about it. So then our third team is our rail safety and inspection team. We have 2 new staff in this group. Actually, one's unnamed again because he's starting he's actually starting on June 8th. But, and Josh actually has been with us for just about 6 months now. So he's still new though. I call him new. But they go and are performing our state railroad crossing inspections. We have some state laws that say the railroad crossings need to be good and smooth, not a rough ride, and you can tear out your tires or anything like that. So they're going out there checking the crossings. They try to check these. And to say this, there's about 2,750 right now of these crossings. So there's a lot of them. And we only have, you can see the 5 staff in the group, but they're going around doing these reviews. They've actually implemented a new system to do those reviews too. I should mention this. It's a where they can go and actually take their photographs, upload it, and it's all web-based essentially. So they can go and use their state hand phone or their state laptop to go and do their assessment there. They also enforce other state laws, walkways, clearances, and other safety items. These actually are more items that we are paying attention to in the yards and around switches. There can be some issues there that we just don't want, and so they're working on that. They perform federal inspections. We encourage our inspectors to become FRA certified inspectors. We've got a couple of them that have done that, and a couple more that are going to be working on it for sure. And so in that sense, they specialize in a certain area like track signals, operating practices, and they will go and perform about 50 federal inspections a year. And they've got the full law enforcement authority as the federal FRA inspectors too in doing this. It's a safety activity. Of course, we respond to lots of complaints from citizens. There's block crossings in particular on TDOT's website. There's a link that goes and takes you to the FRA portal where the citizens can go and log in a complaint that, hey, they had to wait on a train, how long, and they provide a little other information that's logged in. And I'll say that we do go and prepare a annual report to the state legislature. They asked us to do that. And so it gives some summaries about which crossings got reported, which had the most reports, and which cities had a lot of blockages. We work with the railroad companies, so especially our inspection staff, they're talking to the railroad local staff that are working in the area. So we use them to reach out about issues and concerns about, it could be anything from, hey, there's a locomotive that's been idling there for a couple of days. Well, that's because it was freezing weather. If you turn the locomotive off, it's really, really hard to start them back up. They're diesel engines. We get blockage issues, of course, and there may be a variety of other concerns like, hey, we think that this could be a problem where there's a lump in the road, or we see something very weird about the tracks, or a bridge. We get those every once in a while. We aren't really bridge specialists in these inspection teams here. The railroads actually inspect their own bridges, just to be clear, but our group works with all the complaints, and we try to get that resolved and work very closely with the railroad companies, more as partners rather than an enforcement level of how we like to approach things. So I'm going to just say at the beginning, when I was talking about growing things, we're hoping we get a nice big forest around some of our freight techniques. I grabbed this picture right here, but this is some contact information if you want to get a hold of me and talk any items. Are there any questions right now? Nope. Okay. All right. I'm going to move it on then.
Well, I don't know if I have as many green photos as you, Eric, so appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for being here in person and online. I was trying to think back about my participation in the Freight Advisory Committee. I remember when the requirements came about for the creation of Freight Advisory Committees in each state. And I don't know if it's maybe 2013 or so, if I've got my timeline correct, but as a state, I've really seen how we have really grown as it comes to the interactions of the different modes and the conversations around good freight movement. If you go back to, I think it was Ice-T, I think that was the first term of intermodal. And I believe most people around that time were confused about what it exactly meant. And so I'm glad to see that we use that term appropriately as well as multimodal. And as the commissioner mentioned, our economy is built around and is dependent upon our transportation system. As most of you know, we border 8 surrounding states. Of our 11 metropolitan areas, 5 of them are bi-state MPOs. In Memphis, Clarksville, up in the Kingsport, Bristol, and then in Chattanooga. So we're very diverse when it comes to not only our geography, but the urban mix that we have. And, I appreciate a lot of the comments online about the importance of places like Memphis. But as Dan alluded to, the waterway side of things and our rail, you can really begin to see the diversity of our modes. And I would be remiss if I didn't also mention aviation. And that is another division that's under the Bureau of Planning. It's recent in the last 2 years. And we have been working very closely. Dan has been working very closely with our aeronautics division to look at the opportunities to expand the understanding of and importance of good freight movements as it relates to aeronautics. You've heard a lot today. You've heard a lot from the commissioner about our vision and where he has taken us over the last year. He's obviously not new to TDOT. But in the role as commissioner. But I think it's been very valuable because we really haven't missed a beat from the transition of commissioners. And you've heard a lot about the investments that have been made in our state over the last several years and as of recent, and some of the activities that Dan has mentioned and Eric have mentioned that we've done in the last 5 months. My presentation is going to touch a lot of that, and so I may fast forward on some slides because I don't want to spend too much time on topics, and then I'll leave time for questions because I think there were some questions that were asked early on, and there were some questions asked on choice lanes, and I'll attempt to address those. But so let me just quickly, the commissioner kind of has laid out his, is that shown all right, Dan, there? Is that okay? Yeah. His vision and mindset for the department. It's really to relentlessly pursue excellence in three key areas: program delivery, staff development, and system modernization. And, you know, I told somebody this recently. I'd asked the commissioner as soon as he came out with this, I'm like, real quick question. You say program delivery, what do you mean? And he says, every program that we have in the department. Because typically and often when people hear program, they think about our 10-year program or our program of projects. But as you know, in this group here, our programs at TDOT are much more vast than that. We have transit programs, we have rail programs, we have an aeronautics program, transit, you name it, bicycle and pedestrian, safety. So when we talk about programs at the department, we're talking about all of those activities that touch all 3,200 of our employees. Most of you know, over the last several years, we've gone through a complete reorganization of our department, and we've given up positions so that we could create an organizational structure for the future. Eric talked about some of the positions that we've recently hired. Those are within our EPIC org structure. So they now are positions that we're able to have with our new organizational framework. And so that staff development is really intended to allow for positions, for people in key positions to advance within their position, not look at an org chart and wait for somebody to retire and whatnot to advance, so they can actually grow in their positions. And we've created uniformity across the department relative to that. I'm happy to say we are down. Now, we're still filling positions, but in terms of getting people into an EPIC position, out of those 3,200, we're down to less than 100 that haven't made that transition. So it's really amazing to see that we're finally advancing in the organizational structure and filling positions. And so if you're looking for a job and you're online, we still have job postings as of today. I think they actually came out yesterday for the next rounds of positions at TDOT. And system modernization. I think this is also another really important thing. When we talk about systems, we're not only talking about our transportation systems, but we're also talking about the digital systems of the department. We're going through a complete process of looking at our IT systems, as well as the integration and advancement of AI. So very excited as a department of where we've come and where we're going. So on this here, the commissioner talked about the funding. Under Governor Lee, the department has seen an enormous amount of increase in funding that we've ever seen as a department agency. Typically, we would say that we were a department that lived off of what we killed, meaning that the gas tax. But since the Transportation Modernization Act in 2023, that was $3.3 billion. In 25, we had another $1 billion of additional general funds and $80 million in reoccurring. And that $80 million in reoccurring, you heard earlier this morning about the Rural Service Patrol. That is an example of the dollars that we're putting to use through that $80 million. And Dan mentioned to it, it's a reoccurring. So our investment in Rural Service Patrol is here to stay. It has the dedicated funding to allow that to occur. In that other $80 million, there are other activities that we were able to advance, spot safety improvements. We also were able to advance some additional resurfacing projects as a result of that in the initial years. And then this last cycle, session that ended in April, we received an additional $400 million of one-time funds. And then, as we've talked to you and Dan mentioned about the rest areas and welcome centers, $165 million. The $165 million is not in our budget, so to speak. It's in the Department of General Services. And because those are structures, but we will be working with them in that effort. Here is just kind of a highlight of this year's budget. I mentioned the $400 million. We have $50 million that we've allocated for maintenance, $150 million for non-reoccurring for a bridge. So online, and you'll be able to see this on our website, but we just released our most recent 10-year plan this month. And so there are 50 off-system bridges that are as part of the Improve Act that will be advancing as a result of the $150 million that you see there, worst to best. So we're advancing the Improve Act projects that are in the worst condition in the state. And so if we're successful to get through those projects, we'll go to further down the list. But that's what we've identified. And then we've put $200 million to work in the 10-year plan. So there were two other areas there, and I mentioned the $165 million for the rest areas and welcome centers. We also had funds that went to aviation. And so in Tennessee, we have general aviation airports and commercial air carrier airports. The commercial ones are like the Memphis, the Nashville, the Tri-Cities up in Johnson City, Knoxville, and Chattanooga. And then the general aviation are your smaller ones just up the street from here, John C. Tune is an example. And so much like Dan referred to the Transportation Equity Fund, the Transportation Equity Fund actually funds three important components as it relates to freight. It is the short line, it also has the waterways, and then it has general aviation. Unfortunately, much like we've seen on the rail side, the TEF funding for air carrier or for the aviation has had changes to it over time that has impacted how much revenues that we've historically received. So it requires funding from the General Assembly on an annual basis. This is a quick kind of, we did initially have an ask for an additional 25 million in reoccurring for the department. Unfortunately, in the very last days of session, that went to air carriers. I like to say it this way, it's not exactly how we would have liked it as a department, but it is good for transportation in Tennessee because we're seeing the investments in our commercial airports. Again, would have loved to see it on our side of the ledger, but it's on the other side. You can also see some onto the right side here. There are some other administrative amendments and legislative amendments that occurred in the last portion of the budget cycle process. Some of these are obviously one-time funds, and then they were also essentially either associated with a particular project and whatnot. And you can see what Eric mentioned about the 20 million in for the short lines. As you'll note, all of those are non-reoccurring. So it's important as we think about continued investments in our transportation system. This is just a quick overview of what the 10-year plan currently have. Initially, there were 93 projects in 2026. We were able to add an additional 22 projects. 6 of those were part of our what we call our statewide partnership program. I'll show a little bit of brief information on that. I've already mentioned about the 50 bridges. This all is online. Our 10-year plan is online, so you have complete ability to dive into this. So let me talk a little bit about choice lanes. I know that Dan has given some stats and statistics, and so I think what I'll do here is attempt to answer the question that was asked about when. So I said 8 years. So where did I put my notes? Okay, so choice lanes, we are currently, as the commissioner had mentioned, working through the process. We have 4 developers that are concessionaires that are currently working on their final proposals. And that information will be, the winning proposal will be presented to the Transportation Modernization Board in August. So we are very, very close to having a decision about who will be the P3 partner. What I wanted to mention on this in terms of like schedule and so forth is that, so choice lanes for Tennessee, I-24, we're not looking at choice lanes as a singular project, but as a program. And so in that context, there's an important component to choice lanes, and it's called the commercial back office and commercial services, which what that means is that the commercial, the the concessionaire is not providing that service. We are maintaining and retaining that as an agency. And so there's a reason for that because we want to ensure that the traveling public has us as the state is who they're interacting with as it relates to the fee structure in terms of collection process and customer service. And then that also creates the standardization as if we look at other corridors or other geographies. So giving us more of that consistency rather than just having it being in isolation with one concessionaire. The reason I bring this up is because within the concession agreement, there are targets on opening dates. And so we have to have the commercial back office and those services available the day one they open. And so the way it's written, it's possible that there could be segments that could open sooner than what I just told you. And so the soonest segments can open is June 2032. And so we will have to have our commercial back office and commercial customer service center operations, and we'll be doing that through a vendor, but we'll have to have that in place because that has to exist. So hopefully I answered your question about the soonest part, but a lot more to unfold in the coming months. Very exciting for the state of Tennessee to be in this position, to be able to provide the next opportunity of transportation for citizens to choose how they move. And as Dan has mentioned, we're looking forward to the opportunities it presents for freight movement for truck, and then also for passengers as it relates to transit. It's been a very key component to us of making sure that it allows for those that are utilizing transit to be able to be in it for free. And so have been working very diligently with the transit providers in this region to have that opportunity. I'd also like to, and I'll just briefly hit on this, we're undertaking planning environmental linkage studies. And essentially what this is for corridors, much like the I-24, we're looking at the inner loop and I-65 South, as well as I-40/75 in the Knoxville area, and then I-24 in the Chattanooga area, as it relates to corridor approach. And to seeing if there are opportunities, much like we're looking at on I-24. A Pell process allows us to work through the NEPA process so that on purpose and need, helping us get a project further down the process so that once we determine if there is a solution or multiple solutions, we can move quickly into the NEPA process to advance a project or projects. And so we're taking this kind of approach across the state to how to help expedite projects in the planning process. Commissioner didn't hit too much on this, but our whole reorganizational structure and focus on project management and delivery in the last 2 years, and well, in the last 4 years, we've hit over 90% of the projects in delivery. And in the last 2 years, 100% of the projects that we have in our 10-year plan to delivery that are in those plans. It is in our project managers' individual performance plans and our employees' performance plans. So there's a lot of incentive to making sure that these projects get delivered. And we update the 10-year plan every year so that we can make sure we understand costs, we can understand schedule, and make the appropriate adjustments so that we can deliver on what is promised. I mentioned the statewide partnership program. I'm not going to spend too much time on this here, but when we developed the 10-year plan in 2023, we did a call for projects from our communities that had been making investments in projects, but needed additional funding to see it to completion. I'm happy to say over the last 3 years, we've advanced 21 projects at roughly $1.7 billion. And they're bringing over $350 million locally. And when I say locally, they may be bringing federal funds that they have access to in their communities, but really seeing some great progress in this particular program area. I want to kind of give you a quick road ahead, so to speak. We are working on the update of our statewide long-range transportation plan. We did a quick update last year, really to just account for some things that have occurred since 2016. The Transportation Modernization Act, some of the changes that we'd had in terms of our process. But this year, we're doing a full update to the plan. I just want to put it on your radar, and so that we really want your engagement and involvement in that. And so there'll be 4 key areas. And one of the things I think is important from a freight perspective is our previous plan process was really policy-based. We will continue policy-based. However, we're taking a statewide corridor network approach. And so we're really trying to make sure that we're advancing in, investments. And so our goal here is to continue this kind of evolution of promoting things into the 10-year plan process so we can advance projects. And it's a very holistic approach, looking at freight, mobility, safety, economic aspects, and so forth. We'll be doing some evaluation and screening through scenario planning, looking at funding, as well as I mentioned, engagement. More to come on this, but I just wanted to lay the seeds there. I guess that's the closest I have, Eric, to green is, yeah. The last thing I want to mention here is Dan talked about reauthorization and the current, I think actually there might be I think today is a hearing in DC on the proposed bill. As Dan mentioned, it's over 1,000 pages. We have yet to digest it ourselves, but we are actively involved in these conversations, both at the national level through various associations. And as Dan's mentioned, for our state, and I think we hear it nationally, is that states want the maximum flexibility in the funds. And the reason for that is really projects are complex. And they're costly, as Eric mentioned, just what he's mentioned on the railroad crossings, and time is money. And so the quicker that we can get dollars on the street and hedge off those costs, the better. And so that's really, we have many programs, unfortunately. They're great programs, but they may have 5 different categories of how they can be used, and they be geographically. So I can't spend money in one category in another community that's ready. And so we have multiple programs that are like that create confliction. And so when we talk about, prioritizing formula funding, we really want the dollar so that we can go through the processes of making that. There's also things around, and we heard this just yesterday, the commissioner and I, with some mayors across the state, about the environmental process in terms of review process. And more states are getting what is called delegated authority. So those decisions can be made at the state level. That is something that we're interested in. And then also supporting innovation and technology. The use of drones for bridge inspection, things that can take our employees and others out of harm's way in terms of doing inspections. And then also being able to do things more quickly in that space through the use of drones or LiDAR. We're really interested in the advancements of technology. Dan talked about what we're seeing in Tennessee as it relates to autonomous. And I think maybe a couple of years ago, Dan and I had conversations with companies in other states, and they are coming this way for sure. And as he mentioned, we had Gatik here, I guess a month or 2 ago, and that was very exciting to see a middle mile company here in Tennessee. So just kind of wrapping this up. As a commissioner would say, is that we're going to put every dollar to work. We prioritize state of good repair first, and our 10-year plan and our delivery. So we're going to deliver on the projects as promised. And then really, I didn't get into some slides on this, but I think most of you know this and see this in your industries. Inflation is real. And so projects are not like wine. They don't age, over time well. They just cost more. And so, we're trying to be as efficient as we can in the delivery process to really, we're utilizing alternative delivery, trying to take different approaches and strategies, much like I mentioned about Pell, to help us get to decisions in the decision process quicker so that we can put the dollars to work. That is all that I have, and I'm not sure how I did on time, Dan, but I can take 3 minutes. All right, I can take some questions. Looks like Kathy's got some from online. If they're hard, you get to answer them, Dan. Oh, you want me to,
Yes.
you want me to stop sharing or see? Okay. Okay. Yeah, Dan, you will have to help in on this one a little bit. So there's several questions here about maritime and waterways. And I'm going to let Dan answer this question because I think that he's been a lot more intimately involved in this, but I would say as a state, this is an important topic to us.
All right, for the audience in the room here, Chad Dorsey with MARAD. Are there any future plans to potentially include more maritime inland waterways project and funding as a budget item, similar to neighboring state programs, such as matching funds for MARAD's PIDP program? And then he wrote, as information, the Tennessee River is designated as Marine Highway M65, and the Cumberland recently designated as Marine Highway M24. So, Chad, that's almost like a setup question, which I love. As I worked through Chad to get the Marine Highway designation, so that's very critical to the state. If you think of, I say this all the time, and Chad's probably sick of hearing me say this, but one big quality that Tennessee has is all 5 of our largest urban areas are connected by water, and nobody really understands. But we really don't. The Waterway Transportation Equity Fund is not enough funding to do one of these programs. So, yeah, Chad. So, a little deeper dive of Waterway, which is a passion of mine. If you look at those 5 cities, they're all now Marine Highway designation, whether it's Memphis and the M55. And then M24 with Clarksville and Nashville, and then the Tennessee River, M65, Chattanooga, and Knoxville. So if you look at that, there's a couple things, Chad, that you probably don't know about. One is a research project that was just completed. I think it was finalized this week that UTK did for us. It's actually, we're doing another project that's on the books that will be coming out, which is the next evolution of that project. I will say that one of the things that Preston mentioned, that why, and there's 2 lines of thought, why we would like funds that kind of come with less restrictions is because that's a way to do some of these programs that we could do. So when we have general fund transfers, or we have things with no strings attached, perfect example is what happened in Ashland City, Tennessee. An investment by Ingram Barge Company in Ashland City. They came to the table with $30 million. They needed $3 million. We were able to take $3 million, give it to them. That groundbreaking, my time, was it a year and a half ago or a year ago?
Yeah, about a year and a half.
About a year and a half ago. And, projects at the state level take a long time. Just as info, that work is already complete. As a matter of fact, Finance is processing the last invoice for the $3 million, and that facility will be open very soon. So it's a perfect example of a public-private partnership where your hands aren't cuffed, and it's putting the dollars to use. And Ashland City in Middle Tennessee really need another port because Cherokee Marine is now going to be our the East Bank and all the development that's going down there. So it's truly, Chad, I would love to get with the legislature and get me a $20 million annual appropriation recurring every year to do a program to really, because there is a lot of potential, as the study showed that UTK just finished for us. There is a lot of potential. There are some barriers. The waterway does come with barriers. Most of them are the size of the locks and different things that was pointed out in that research project. And I'm not so sure that project, it just closed, so I'm not so sure that's posted now, but if it not, it is posted. So just posted this week. Any other questions from the audience or online? Comment that Melissa Taylor and Chattanooga wrote. We are working hard to wrap up step 1 and move right into step 2A, which is core development plan. Step 2 was broken into two pieces. That was the update. Melissa's the kind of like the project manager for the city of Chattanooga on the Corridor ID project, the Sunbelt Atlantic Coalition. And I think that's it. Oh, got another. Oh, Chad says, thanks, Dan. Good deal. So Donna's got another question?
TDOT is debt-free on roadways, correct?
Correct.
Is there any plans to do anything differently in the future as far as, because I know legislators talking about.
Yeah. So I think you know this. So TASER, the Tennessee Commission on Intergovernmental Relations, excuse me, it's a mouthful to get out there, is undertaking a study. The legislature, not this last session, but the session before, asked them to look at TDOT's transportation needs, and then also look at a variety of state, other state practices as it relates to financing and funding transportation. That study is supposed to come out in the next couple of months. And I think that may spur some conversation. We don't know what that study includes. We have not seen the draft yet, but I think that may set the tone for conversation.
And they did ask me questions on it, as they did with finance department, several other pieces of the puzzle to try to figure that out. And as you know, it's a tough question, right? There's mileage-based user fees that some states mostly are piloting and all the different things. But unfortunately, no new taxes is still a very strong thing that nobody wants to leverage. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So with the delivery, the numbers are amazing of what you guys have been able to accomplish, but it does seem to tie to the infusion of year-over-year money. Is that, would those delivery numbers be possible without the legislative?
Yeah. So the question, so that everyone can hear online, the question was about the success of the 10-year plan delivery of recent, and then the fact that it's been with the infusion of one-time monies. So our 10-year plan is fiscally constrained by funding type by year. So when you look at our 10-year plan list of projects, if it is utilizing federal funds in year 3, those dollars aren't available to us until year 3. Now, the state dollars, we have greater flexibility of where we can move those on the one-time monies, but we still making assumptions of our relative revenue for state and federal out. I don't have the slide with me, but if I would, we have one that shows the cliff. And so if funding is not resolved within the next couple of years, I think by, Dan, you remember, it's like, I think it's about 5 or 6 years out, we're going to return to 2018 funding levels. So what that means is that we will have fewer projects in the 10-year plan. We'll still be delivering them. They'll just be fewer.
So we did have another question online, just for the audience in the room, talking about the weigh in motion project. Does this mean that trucks will no longer have to pull in the weigh stations like the ones we have in West Knoxville that create some congestion in the area? Mike, I'm going to answer that in 2 different questions. So weigh in motion is basically mainline sensors that the trucks will do. So what we'll think of it this way is it's going down the main line at say 62 miles an hour, a truck. It will have a device that was actually, Adam showed it on his presentation. It'll have that ELD device or the computer in the truck that will say either pull in or bypass. So it's going to weigh it in motion while it's going down the main line. And it could be, they still may pull them in to the rest area. I don't want to make it sound like that's total elimination of that, because there are other things that the officers look at, such as safety record and different things of that nature. So in theory, those trucks will bypass the scales based upon this device that will say either you can go down, maintain your 62 miles an hour, or pull in. So that's one question. That's one piece of your question. Where you're referring to in West Knoxville, though, we are looking at a total revamp of that corridor, Preston mentioned the Pell study. That is one aspect of it. Eventually, we are going to move that weigh station. We're going to move it in a different area. For those that may not are familiar with that area, it really is an unsafe, you have trucks that are merging, then they're getting over, I think, in like a mile and a half to go to over 3 lanes of traffic to go down to Atlanta. So it's really a congested area. So we're looking at trying to reduce that congestion in the area. So stay tuned on that, Mike. But I do think in the overall interest of safety, that it's going to be a good move as we move forward in that and addressing that issue. Any other questions before I kind of wrap it up? All right, I don't see any online. I want to actually thank both the audience in here and the people online. Very, very interactive. A lot of times these things go and you don't get a single question. And I don't know, maybe we didn't do a good job explaining, or maybe we did too good. That it's an interesting topic that everybody's interested in. So I thank you for that. As I mentioned in the very beginning, sorry about, we had a little technical difficulties, but the afternoon or after break session really went smooth. We're going to work on that. I would also say that one of the things that we're going to be sending out a survey, and we really want feedback on what do you want to hear about. You know, if you look at the audience, just as I look at through a lot of different names on the people that are both online, and I look around the audience, you know, we have several consultants. Obviously, we love our consultant partners when we look at them, because that's how we get the best practice from other states and utilize that information to try to get products really for the constituents of Tennessee. So I want to thank you there. We have several universities on there. Once again, another way how to really look at the system as a whole and really better the knowledge of how we move freight safe and efficiently throughout the system. We also have some companies online. We got the Trucking Association represented. We have several railroads online. We have several people from different organizations from all across the state. And I really want to thank all of you all for giving us 3 hours of your time. We did make the decision. Preston said something in passing. I guess now it's been 3 years ago, and he kind of offered a challenge, but he said it this way. He goes, you know, we do some great stuff, but we don't talk about it. And really, so I hope that as you're sitting there, there's some things that you go, wow, I didn't know the state did that, or that's why they do that. But I'm also a firm believer that we're not perfection. So if you have an idea to make better, safe, and efficient movement of goods, people, and services in the state, that is our vision and our mission. So please bring those ideas out to me. But in the survey, I really want to, you know, do you think this length was too long? Do we want to shorten it? Do we want to have more of a focus on one aspect instead of kind of a hodgepodge of ideas, or do we cover too much information, too little information? Because we are planning on having an in-person meeting with a virtual option, and then in the fall we're going to have a virtual option that you can sit there and do it at your desk. And now lately the beauty of these things is you can actually review them later, and I find that's where a lot of times I do as I get home. So with that, any closing time for last questions? We are looking in the middle to end of October for the next update. So stay tuned for that. And we will send out a link to this meeting as well. So once again, thank you all very much. Everybody be safe. And I'm going to leave.